Okay, we're back again. This is Jay Smith, and we have John McLatchie here from Scotland, though you're in Northern England at the moment. But we're talking about looking at some of the scientific supposed proofs of the Qur'an, and we're finding these really aren't proofs. In fact, if anything, these are foibles. And we want to look at some of these foibles, some of these errors that are in the Qur'an. Help me here. Give me some examples of some errors that you have found.
So in Surah 18, for example, Surah Al-Kahf, which is in verse 86, we read about the kind of dual...
Let me read it, and then we'll go ahead and unpack it. This is what it says. Until when he reached the setting place of the sun, he found it setting in a spring of black, muddy water, and he found near it a people. Okay?
Right, and so this account concerns a man called Dhul Qarnain in the Qur'an. Who's Dhul Qarnain? Well, Quranic commentators differ on this, but most Quranic commentators, there's a general consensus that it's Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great.
And according to this passage, this verse in verse 86, he travels so far west that he finds the setting place of the sun and finds it setting into a pool of muddy water, murky water, and finds there's a people living nearby. And we of course know that there isn't actually a place where the sun sets. I mean, an Islamic response might be that it's just using the language of appearance, and so it's setting into the water, and it was just a nice sunset. But it actually says there was a people living nearby.
Yes.
Where the sun set. And we know, of course, that just doesn't happen.
Now, let me just carry on from that. He then runs to the east.
Yeah.
Actually, he then runs to the east and sees it coming out.
Yeah.
So, and the people are burned by the sun. They're so close they get burned by the sun.
Yeah.
And then he runs to the north, and he sees a big wall made out of iron and brass from mountain to mountain. Now, let me think. Alexander the Great lived in 3rd century BC.
Yeah.
A wall that would keep an entire army out from one mountain to the other. There's a mountain there. We have a huge valley in between. A wall that tall, made out of iron and brass. Don't you think someone would have observed it?
I would have thought so, yeah.
That would have been one of the greatest wonders of the world, of the ancient world, if anybody could build a wall out of iron and brass in the 3rd century BC. Why is it no one noticed it?
I don't know. Maybe the Quran was just wrong.
You've got some real problems in this story of Dhul Qarnain.
Right.
But I love that one. Setting in the water, muddy water. Obviously, it's pre-scientific. This is nothing more than a fable.
Exactly.
We know where that comes from. Do you know where that is sourced?
Where is that sourced?
It's actually sourced by Heraclius. This is a tract Heraclius wrote in 630 AD about himself.
Wow.
When he defeated the Persians. He says, remember Dhul Qarnain, remember Alexander the Great. 900 years ago, he talked about this great man who went to the west and he went to the east. He saw the sun set in the water. He saw it rise up. He came to the people who were being attacked by these evil people from across the mountain. And so he built up this wall to protect these people. But he said there will be a man coming who will defeat those people from across the mountains.
Right.
I am he.
Right.
Heraclius, the Byzantine Emperor. He wrote it as a tract for himself. That finds its way into Surah 18.
Yeah.
It's nothing more than a tract, a political tract.
And you can look at some of the Hadith sources to see how the early Muslims actually interpreted those texts. And so you can look, for example, you can look at another verse, for example, which is in Surah Yasin, verse 36, verses 38 through 40. Says, and the sun is quickly proceeding towards its destination.
Let me go ahead and read it right out of the Quran itself. And the sun runs on its fixed course for a term. That is the decree of Almighty, the All-Knowing. And the moon we have measured for its mansions till it returns like an old, dry, curved date stalk. It is not for the sun to overtake the moon, nor does the night outstrip the day. They all float each in an orbit.
And so here you're dealing with a cumulative case for the understanding of the author of the Quran as to the relationship between the trajectories of the sun and moon and the earth. And so it seems that the author of the Quran actually thinks that the sun and moon are moving in relation to the earth, because it says that that they can't overtake each other in this. And in fact,
so back up. What you're telling me, it's pretty obvious from the text. The earth is the center of the universe.
Right.
These are going around the earth.
Right. These are going around the earth.
Ah.
And you can look at as I mentioned, you can look at the Hadith sources to find out how the early Muslims interpreted those verses. So in the case of the Surah 18 verse 86 one about Dhul Qarnain, we read in Sunan Abu Dawud that Abu Dar said, I was sitting behind the Apostle of Allah, who was riding a donkey while the sun was setting. He asked, do you know where the sun sets? I replied, Allah and his Apostle know best. He says, it sets in a spring of warm water. And so it's clearly that there's actually a physical location in the early Islamic understanding, the understanding of the early generation Muslims as to where the sun actually sets. And if you read in Sahih Bukhari, which of course is the most authoritative hadith collection for Sunni Muslims,
Sahih, yeah.
Yeah, Sahih, it's one of the Sahih hadith. We read, this is in volume 4, book 54, chapter 4, number 421. Narrated Abu Dar, the Prophet asked me at sunset, "Do you know where the sun goes at the time of sunset?" I replied, "Allah and His Apostle know better." He said, "It goes till it prostrates itself underneath the throne and takes the permission to rise again. And it is permitted, and then a time will come when it will be about to prostrate itself, but its prostration will not be accepted. And it will ask permission to go on its course, but it will not be permitted. But it will be ordered to return when it has come, and so it will rise in the west." And that is the interpretation of the statement of Allah, and the sun runs its fixed course for a time decreed. That is the decree of Allah, the exalted in might, the all-knowing. And so it's very clear how the early generation Muslims understood those verses in a very literal way.
That with chapter 36, Surah 36. It's obviously, from what you've just told me, from both Dawud and Bukhari, it's the sun that does the moving.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the sun that gets the permission.
Right.
It's the sun that actually goes into the water and comes up out of the water.
Right.
And the earth is the one that sits still.
Right.
Whoa, you got a real problem here.
Yeah, real problem.
But pre-scientific man would have thought this. We do know that pre-scientific man thought that the earth was the center and everything went around it, one chasing the other, as it says here.
But Allah certainly wouldn't have thought like that.
No, not if this is really from God.
Right, exactly.
It would not have made that mistake. That's great, John. Thank you so much. This has been terrific. We'll look at some other material. Stay with us. We're still going to unpack a few of these scientific problems. Good to have you.